everyone. Welcome to another episode of Murder with Friends. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge. This is the show where two friends get together and talk about some of the dark sides of history. I'm really excited about today's show because I have one of my favorite comedians in Los Angeles and also just in the world, and just general awesome guy, Earl Skakel. Thank you for coming on Murder with Friends.
No. Thank you.
So, Earl, how do we know each other? Let's talk about why we're friends even to begin with. Because you met me when I was like but a babe in the comedy world, or just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I fangirled a little bit when I met you at Roast Battle. Do you remember that?
I do.
He
Allie came up to
introduced
me and
us.
said, hey, my friend Grace wants to meet you. She's like a super fan.
Oh
And
God, that's so embarrassing.
I'm like, well, I don't have a lot of fans, let alone super fans. So I remember meeting you, and I was like, wow, this girl's got to be a little off to be a fan of mine.
I just remember asking you all these large questions about how to do comedy in life in LA and everything, and you were just very zen about it, which I think I was definitely drawn to.
Well, I mean, I've done comedy for 16 years in Los Angeles, which is a lot of people quit after about 6 months.
Yes.
Once you figure out there's not a lot of money.
I was shocked.
So I feel like I'm the Yoda.
Yeah, you're definitely the Yoda of the LA comedy scene. And I had you on a show of mine, I guess a couple months ago, and I told you that I was doing Murder with Friends.
Yes.
And the first thing you said was, I've got a good one. I didn't even tell you about the premise. And you were like, I've got a good one. And you were the person that introduced me to the Wonderland Murders.
It was like the OJ trial for me in the 80s. It was like, it had everything. Celebrity, sex, music, drugs, and speaking of OJ, the lead detectives were the O.J. Simpson detectives.
Yeah.
So
So if you could sum up the Wonderland Murders, what we're going to talk about today, in just a couple sentences, how would you do that for our viewers?
the cocaine, theft, porn, and murder. I mean, it's really those four words.
Well, that's how Earl summed it up, but we're going to take a look at a video that I found on YouTube from, I want to say, the 1980s or 90s. It's a really campy documentary. Let's take a look at how they sum up the Wonderland Murders.
In the late 1970s, hardcore porno star John Curtis Holmes was an icon of Hollywood success. Movies, money, sex and drugs.
Mr. Watt.
Johnny.
His cult status was assured until his involvement in one of the most horrific murders of the last 30 years.
It was as though someone had walked through the house with buckets of blood sloshing them.
The brutal slayings known as the Wonderland Murders were, for all intents and purposes, the results of Holmes' insatiable drug addiction and his utter lack of moral judgment. We will take you inside the world of John Holmes.
Yeah, so that kind of sums up what the Wonderland Murders, what we're going to be talking about today, because I'd never heard about this before. And you can't talk about the Wonderland Murders without talking about John Holmes. So let's talk about this guy. Let's talk about John Holmes before he became Johnny Watt, as a lad. There you go.
I mean, not the best looking guy in the world.
Literally. So yeah, he was not a good looking guy. He was actually from a small town in rural Ohio, and he had sort of an unstable family life. Did you know his parents were divorced 3 times? His stepdad and his mom were married and divorced 3 times total.
I guess that he didn't come from a stable home.
Yeah, something says that there might not be stability there. But the weird thing about John Holmes too, going into his origin story, I guess, was that he came from this unstable background, but he tried to have a stable life. He had odd jobs when he moved out to LA. He didn't move out to LA and just go into porn. And my question for you is, he obviously had, we know, a 13-inch penis, which as a lesbian is so, it's like a nightmare to me to even say that, to even know that that existed. How did he not know before he was like 21 that he had this huge gift, I guess? Don't guys talk about penis size?
I don't.
Well, you don't
They
compare?
do. Well, it's been said I have one of the best dick pics in LA comedy,
That's
but
true.
it's no John Holmes. I think even if you have a big package, I don't know if most guys with big packages go, I want to go into porn. It's not the greatest career path.
But it seems like he didn't even know that he had that big of a dick. Like, there are a couple stories about how he was discovered. One of them was that, so someone noticed his package, I guess, is that the word?
His bulge.
His bulge, yeah. Someone noticed his bulge and advised him that he could make a lot of good money doing porno loops. And then there's another story that says that he was at a men's card-playing club, and when he was going to the bathroom at the urinal, another guy noticed his dick and said that he would take good photos of him and he could make a good business in it.
I bet.
So it seems like he didn't know that he had this, that his dick was so disproportionate to others until he was older, or at least in his 20s.
I mean, I think if you've got something like 13 inches, you know you have it.
We had to blur this out. I talked to Amir, I begged him, I was like, can we please show his dick? And Amir was like, no, Grace, because you can't show porn on YouTube, allegedly. So here's a photo that we're gonna throw up for you, and I'm gonna show this to Earl. That is an early shoot of John Holmes. Just a scrawny guy with a huge elephant shadow dick.
I'm more impressed by the African necklace he has on. That is where my eyes were drawn to.
Yeah.
Proving that I'm not gay.
You were looking at the necklace.
I was looking at the necklace
You were
versus...
looking, what is the story behind this photo? What was the theme of this shoot that he was on?
Yeah, I mean, this looks like it was taken, I don't know, in someone's living room maybe in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Which is...
Definitely doesn't look nice.
It's an impressive picture nonetheless.
Well, and he was an impressive guy, which is why as soon as he started getting into adult porn, he took off. I was reading a bunch of places that described him as the, quote, Elvis of porn. He was making as much as $3,000 a day.
Well, which is impressive because even though I don't watch porn, you know, the majority of the money makers in porn then and now are women. You know, you know, people want to look at beautiful women. They don't necessarily want to look at... I mean, John Holmes was not a very attractive man.
No.
And so you don't really want to, even though he had a big dick,
Yeah.
it's like you don't really want to look at the dick. You want to look at the beautiful girl.
I can certainly relate to that.
Well, but even if you're a straight man looking at a sex scene, you don't want to see some sweaty guy who looks like John Holmes with a big dong. You want to, you know, look at, you know, Seika, who was a big porn star back then.
Well, I think that you bring up a good topic of there was a renaissance going on in the porn industry in the 1970s. Even though 1970s, mid to late 70s, early 80s, there was, you know, it was illegal, but they were doing these very interesting sort of thematic pornos.
Yeah, I mean, they were, you know, they were shown in theaters.
Yeah.
You know, and the Pussycat Theater, which is on Santa Monica and Gardner, it's now the Studs Theater.
Yes.
I went in there once. Well, I was just curious.
Sure.
Who goes to see porn in a theater?
Right.
And it was amazing. It's $25 to get in.
It's $25.
It was crazy.
And I mean, that's kind of the last remaining theater, but during the 70s and 80s, it was more prominent to see porn in a theater.
Yeah, they had like premieres and like Behind the Green Door was like the Star Wars of porn. And any movie that John Holmes was in was huge.
Well, we should mention his character too was Johnny Wad.
Yeah.
So John Holmes was the guy from rural Ohio, and then he became very quickly, as soon as he got into porn, Johnny Wad, who was a private investigator, and he kind of played the same character in all of his films. And there was like a plot to it, and I think we actually have a visual element to just give you an idea about how Johnny Wad's movies, videos, his pictures were different than other pictures. Let's take a look.
What we tried to do was give the audience something that didn't insult their intelligence.
What's going on here, man?
Nothing. What happened?
Come get over here.
Got something for you.
You're gonna go away for a long time for this punk.
That blows my mind, Earl. Look at that production value.
Oh yeah, I mean it was. I mean I don't watch porn today, but back then they actually focused on the acting and if you want to call it that. There
was a story. I think that's the thing that made such an impression on me because I'm only familiar with, I guess, like YouPorn and Pornhub and those sort of websites where it's just sort of, there's no story element. In fact, that'd be laughable if there was a story element. Let's talk a little bit about how John Holmes became Johnny Wad. Johnny Wad started making a whole bunch of money. And a lot of people close to Johnny Wad noticed very early on his addiction to drugs, and how he just sort of lost himself in this character. So the whole, small town guy from Ohio was lost to Johnny Wad, who'd even introduce himself as Johnny Wad if he was meeting someone on the street.
I would too.
I mean, that's the thing that I wanted to talk with you about also, is that of course he would. Of course he would lose himself in this character. He was a guy from sort of a fractured home life, didn't really, didn't get a lot of girls. He was married, but he wasn't super popular in his hometown. Now he's the king of porn. Of course you'd lose yourself in this character, but a big part of that came with his drug addiction.
Well, I mean, he was also the king of porn, because if you look at back in the 70s, you had Ron Jeremy, a young Ron Jeremy, who was kind of a good-looking guy.
I was very surprised to see young pictures of Ron Jeremy.
He's not the person you see today.
No.
And then you had Harry Reams, who now sells real estate in Vegas.
Good for him.
I called him once. I was in Vegas doing a gig, and I saw Harry Reams, realtor. I'm like, that can't be the same Harry Reams, the porn guy. And I saw the pictures, like, my God. So I called him up, and I'm like, hey, man, can we talk about your career? He's like, who is this? I'm like, you can run, but you can't hide, Harry.
So I've never done the sort of drug, they talk about freebasing, coke, and just all this stuff that was in his system. I don't know if you have.
I've never done a drug in my life.
Right. I think I remember, and you've never drank before, right?
Never had a drop.
Yeah. So I'm not familiar with how this would have affected him, but he did an entire picture flaccid because of his drug use. Like that's how he devolved from being this major porn star to so quickly, within the span of about 5 years, you see he's kind of gone. We could see that in already some of the clips that we just watched. And then he's totally flaccid from drug use. But he had a 13-inch dick, so he could still do the shoot.
Well, I mean, a 13-inch dick hard is, I mean, I don't know many girls outside of maybe the Holland Tunnel in New York who could take that. I mean, you think about it. I mean, a vagina is only so deep. The deepest vagina could be, I don't know, 3 to 5 inches deep. So a 13, it's just, you talk about a square peg in a round hole. I mean, it's just, there's only so much that you can fit. Literally, a 13-inch penis soft, you could probably jam 4 or 5 inches, in there, and it could work.
Yes. So basically, to say that John Holmes and Johnny Wad found themselves in a tough position is certainly an understatement and definitely not meant to be a euphemism. All right, guys, when we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about the murders. Johnny Wad becomes a full-fledged murderer, gets in touch with some of the seediest characters I've ever researched. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.